Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How are you, Sarah? Good?
Alhamdulillah. I'm doing well.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. We are
Yourself?
live and ready to go, inshallah.
Okay. As we had introduced the topic, is we're going to keep it pretty conversational between us. For those of us who are joining live, if you can say where you're coming from, we'd love to see that in the comments. And just addressing today's topic, I know is something that so many young Muslims relate to. And we are going to be discussing about emotional attachment before marriage, kind of why it happens, why it can be so hard to manage, how both Islamic guidance and therapeutic wisdom can kind of help us manage through it. So if you've ever found yourself like catching feelings for someone before marriage or getting too emotionally invested too quickly, you're not alone. Love and connection is natural, but without the right framework, they can sometimes lead to a lot of bad feelings like heartbreak, confusion, and even like spiritually struggling as well. So I think we can dive right in to talk about why emotional attachment happens, and then maybe we can pursue after on some like examples of how it occurs, and then like really touch on from like a psychological lens and Islamic lens.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to remind everyone that this is being brought to you by Psyched for You, which alhamdulillah is our initiative to intersect Islam and mental health, psychology, counseling, and therapy. And we're here for you. So Psyched for You is here for you in that we are trying to provide information, resources, tools for our communities to navigate the information that Sarah just provided. And inshallah, this will be a way for people to learn, connect, and even ask questions. So we encourage you to ask your questions, whether it is during this live session or even afterwards, and we are here to help in any way we can.
Absolutely. I guess I could also like do a quick intro of myself for people who don't know who I am. I'm currently practicing in New York as a marriage and family therapy practitioner. Right now, I'm under supervision in True Mind Wellness, so I'm offering therapy services there. Been with the Psych for You team for I think is it almost 2 years. So alhamdulillah, like we really passionate about the work that we're trying to bring to our communities, and inshallah more if topics to come follow our page. And I guess we could just jump right into the topic
Yes.
for today. Okay, so Sheikhna, I know you probably get so many different like messages and like emails and communication about different people who may have gotten attached to someone else before marriage. And what are like Islamically the things that, you know, how we address like this phenomenon happening, and then like from a psychological point of view of like how attachment happens. It's a very natural thing. It's not something to be ashamed of, but it is something that should be controlled. So
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you and I were discussing beforehand, maybe let's present the verse of the Holy Quran that is very clear and shows that the relationship that exists between a man and a woman in the bounds of marriage, in the ties of marriage, is one of love and mercy. And you can see this from the 30th chapter of the Holy Quran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that one of his signs is that he has created you from your spouse, and that the mode or the connection between the spouses is love and mercy. And that the purpose behind it is so that you can live together in tranquility. So there is this suggestion and this lesson from the Quran, or this guidance from the Quran, that marriage is a state in which you're going to find emotional love. You're going to find emotional connection. It is going to be based on love and mercy and finding tranquility in each other. So this is a natural tendency. It is something that we all feel naturally, we all long for. So I think from the Islamic perspective, there's no question about that. That it is the natural inclination, and that's why even the reported hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam is that marriage is considered to be half of your religion. So one who gets married has fulfilled half of their religious obligation, and that is it's very important, very key for us to consider. Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things when we're in this process of like spouse selection too is being cognizant of ourselves. I'll talk about it a little bit later when we talk about strategies that we could use to like, pursue this in the correct way. But humans are wired for attachment. It is like it's part of our survival and part of our
Yes.
emotional well-being. And there are different types of attachment styles that stem from our upbringing. Usually, it's like what shapes it for each person.
Yeah.
So, if you could pull up the other image of the
Yes.
different attachment styles. Yes. So these are these attachment styles really shape how we connect. So whether you're feeling, we need to be aware of like, do we have a secure attachment when we are thinking about when we're interacting with others? Where is this really stemming from? Like, are we feeling like anxious, and is it coming from like a place of loneliness, or when we're having conversations with the other person, and then you start noticing like, why am I like talking to this person? Like, what is the purpose of it?
Right.
Um, what about like when we're even just like scrolling on social media, and if you send a quick message or you meet someone on like a, even if it's like Islamic, right? Like in an MSA environment or a ABSA, or like when we're interacting with the other gender, then it's important to also be very aware of like, okay, what is my attachment style? Because if I know I'm like an anxious attached person and I'm interacting with someone, like what are like things that I need to be aware of when I am interacting, and like catching myself in different moments. Um,
So
if you
Sarah,
have like a,
if
yeah.
if I could ask, sorry to interrupt, but
Mhm.
just so out of my own curiosity, two things that come to my mind that maybe you can shed light on. One, you said
Mhm.
that it's how you're raised, right? So your upbringing determines a lot of these attachment styles and the emotional value that we sort of ascribe to it. And then, so that's one question. Is that how it is? And the second question is, if someone has a, let's say, a preoccupied attachment sort of tendency, or even a fearful one, can those change over time? Are they situational, meaning do they change with situation to situation? Are they different for, let's say, one person, and if they're, let's say, secure for one person and preoccupied for another, can that happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oftentimes you'll see that certain attachment style people end up attracting other attachment styles. So it's like you'll often see like an anxiously attached person like really being very emotionally attached to someone who's avoidant, because every time that person's pulling away, the anxious person will keep on trying to like chase that person, in effort of either it's like trying to minimize loneliness in terms of like wanting validation. So to answer your other point of like, can this change? Absolutely. It takes a lot of self work. It can take therapy,
Mm,
reflection, and just really building that self awareness of, okay, like when am I catching myself behaving in this manner? In a point, I was like, okay, this is like really, you'll notice it like in your nervous system too, of like, okay, like with like the anxious attached, like you'll feel like either your heart might start racing when you didn't get like a certain response back from
yeah,
someone, or
yeah.
um something just like happened out of the blue, unexpected, and it's like that causes a lot of like the issues that we see in our communities today. Is like, okay, I felt like there was like some miscommunications here, or
Yeah. Or you
uh
got ghosted. You got ghosted, if I'm using that term correctly, right?
yeah,
And then
you
you
get
start to wonder,
ghosted.
you wonder whether you got ghosted, right?
Mm-hmm. And then
Yeah.
that just brings even more of those anxious feelings to come up.
Mm,
So
mm,
um it
yeah.
happens a lot.
So are these all, so these four categories, are they all either positive or negative, or can there be aspects of them that are positive, but aspects of them that are simultaneously negative? Meaning, again, the reason I ask this is because it almost seems to me that emotion, particularly when it comes to a relationship between a husband and wife, is not going to be something that's static. It's not all one thing. It's a blend of things. It's almost like a spectrum of emotion that you sort of fade in and out of. So is it like that? Is it all positive, all negative, or is it a blend? Or how would sort of a layperson understand this?
Yeah, I think the ideal, the healthiest place that we want to like approach and be is in the secure. So the other
Mm,
quadrants here are falling on some type of negative axis. So um actually it should be reversed, I guess, unless my screen is not right. But like preoccupied, dismissive, and fearful, there is like a negative component here that can cause like issues in relationships, or even issues in when you're trying to like be logical in your approach of like finding a spouse. These feelings come up. So if you are very preoccupied and you're self-doubting and anxious and sensitive, then that can kind of limit your ability to really, like, when you're assessing the other person you're
mm,
speaking to,
yeah, yeah,
you may read into things a little extra. Or if you are like being dismissive, like self-reliant, avoidant, distant, it's like, okay, you kind of are, you could be either like very fixed in your mindset and like, okay, this is like something that's not working, and like not being as open, like qualities that are essential for like a healthy relationship and a healthy marriage. There needs to be a kind of like openness and like willingness to like see the other person through. There's compromises, and then a lot of like self-awareness. Okay, like I'm noticing I'm tending to like retreat in conflict, or I notice that I am just really being super in my partner's face all the time when he's being distant. I see this all the time in couples therapy sessions, and we honestly, like, a lot of the first step is to like restart learning how to communicate with each other
yeah.
before we're just like, if someone's been like an avoidant person their whole life, and then that starts to get tested in like serious relationships like marriage. So
So
family can be accepting
the
of
key
this.
is to start before marriage, right? Then based on what you're
Hmm.
describing, right? So the key would be, especially for our young people, that as you're beginning to consider marriage and taking the steps to find a spouse, that the most important thing is to first look at yourself and say, what sort of emotional attachment do I have? What
Hmm.
sort of character, personality do I have, and what should I be aware of? And I think, I mean, the concept of self-knowledge is so important then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if
Mm.
you didn't do it before marriage, it doesn't mean you can't do it after marriage either. So
Yeah.
the work can
Yeah.
always be done,
Sure.
um, to maintain stability in all of your relationships, even outside of marriage, even at work,
Yeah.
with your family and friends, community.
Yeah. And for those who are joining us again, if you have comments, please share with us. Have questions to ask, you can ask. And even if you want to just share where you're listening from, that's always wonderful. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so let me jump in from the perspective of Islam then, Sarah, after this very nice explanation you provided for us. In the end, the question comes up, even before marriage, that should we be attached to anything, emotionally or otherwise? And so, if you look at it from the perspective of emotion, it's almost inevitable that a human being is going to be attached to others. Just take, for instance, a child being emotionally attached to the parents, or the parents being emotionally attached to their children or siblings, etc. So, it's very natural for a human being to be emotionally attached to another human being. The question is, what sort of state does it represent for that individual? And how does it express itself? how does it eventually appear, or how does it manifest itself? That's the right word, manifest. If it manifests in a manner that reduces sort of the value of the individual, right? Meaning you're so dependent on somebody else that you have devalued yourself, then Islam doesn't encourage these things. In the same manner, if it creates negativity, if it creates any form of dependency that is beyond what is normal for two human beings, then those are things that Islam again cautions. Because Islam doesn't say that we become dependent necessarily on somebody else for our emotion. We have love, we have strengthening of ties, we have us lifting each other up when one needs to be lifted up, but certainly not a dependency in the sense that I will collapse without that other individual. So from the Islamic perspective, emotion is there. It's natural. It's what drives us to care for each other. It's what causes us to look out for each other. And it causes us that after asking Allah, we seek help from those people who are near to us. And that is a tendency not only amongst human beings, but is emphasized in the Holy Quran and emphasized amongst the hadith of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. I see Dr. Shamsi is joining us all the way from London, UK. Welcome, Dr. Shamsi. She is one of our favorites, and a guide and a teacher to all of us. Alhamdulillah, we're lucky to have her. Sarah, as we move this conversation forward, let's maybe jump into the next aspect of it, okay? And the one that really we're here to talk about. That what are the risks of getting too attached before marriage? All right. And this is let me preface this, that when two people, a young man and a young woman, or even middle-aged man and a middle-aged woman, want to get to know each other, and they're looking at each other as potential spouse or potential mate for the rest of their life, they're looking for that little spark, right? They're looking for that emotional connection. So what's the risk of the emotional connection? Is there a risk? And what does that say sort of about our mental health and the steps we're taking leading into this relationship that in our minds is permanent or is going to be permanent?
Yeah. So that a lot of times when we are focused on the spark or the chemistry and really letting our emotions take lead rather than like thinking about, does this person actually make sense for me lifestyle wise, compatibility wise? When emotions start to get involved, that over attachment can begin to cloud our judgment. That's when we start thinking about like a future together, and all of these like images might come of like, manifesting like, okay, like I see myself with this person, and then it almost like negates you to be able to like actually catch on to things you normally, if you weren't in an emotional lens looking at this person, um like identify like, okay, wait, this is something that I don't know, could be like a red flag for me,
Yeah.
or something that doesn't sit with me. If I like have certain values, like Islamically I want to live a certain lifestyle in the future with like a family and so on and so forth, and this person is not really there, but then you're like, oh, but he makes me feel happy. He's like,
Yeah.
or vice versa. She makes me feel like I am so special, and like
So the
I'm getting so
significance
much
is given to the
validation.
feeling. From what, if I'm understanding you correctly, the significance is
Mm-hmm.
given to that feeling rather than all the other sort of factual evidence that you have about this person.
Right. And
Mm.
that contributes to even anxieties, even like
Mm.
irrational thinking, or like just
Is
like
there
blowing
expectation with
things.
this? Meaning
It
you're
could
expecting
be.
that they feel the same way towards you?
There could be that. So when you're having that expectation, then that enforces the attachment even more. So
Mm.
it will cause you like, when if there's like mixed signals coming from the other person too, then it's like, oh my god, like what's happening, this and this, rather than like
Yeah.
looking at it logically, like, okay, this is how the person is, like, is this right
Mm.
for me, or am I like setting like unrealistic expectations here?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really depends on the situation too. Like sometimes
Sure.
there is like a level of where you want to be like at a minimal, but then it
Mm.
depends on like the scenario of like
So is
the
it
context you're
almost
speaking.
impossible, Sada? is it almost impossible to say, and that's what just came up in my mind, that is it impossible to expect two people who are trying to get to know each other, and we're not talking about the religious permissibility or not, we'll get to that in a second,
Mm-hmm.
but is it almost
Mm-hmm.
impossible to say two people who want to get to know each other and even have maybe a little bit of commonality for them to really put their emotions into perspective? Is that even possible? Is it sort of unreasonable to expect them to be able to do that?
Um, I don't think so. You can like have certain expectations of
Mm,
like what you know like works for you in terms of like what are it's like in a certain level, like within a boundary too. Like
yeah.
sometimes I've had clients where their expectations were like, I need him to like text me good morning every day, and like this is like a sign of
Mm,
like his emotional involvement with me, or
mm,
I'm never gonna initiate a conversation, or like games start to come into play. So like this is all like looking at things primarily from like an emotional lens too, though you may think it's a logical thing or like a
yeah.
requirement, but it's really stemming from what? Like if you look deeper, is it like a validation thing? Is it a
Mm,
why are we making this emotional expectation or kind of
yeah.
creating a certain type of attachment? Sometimes we're just feeling like lonelier, and then that's when expectations feel higher. It can come
Yeah.
in waves too. We're never like a straight line when it comes to
Yeah.
approaching conversations with others.
Yeah. So do you think in my mind, let me give you sort of an example. As you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, I speak to a lot of people about these issues, and we're here to discuss premarital, sort of navigating that premarital period before you actually get
Right.
married.
Mm-hmm.
But instances in which, for example, you have two people who are conversing with each other. Again, we're not discussing right now just the permissibility or prohibition from the Islamic perspective, but these are two people who are talking to each other. They've
Mm-hmm.
developed some amount of a rapport, let's say a connection, maybe an emotional connection. But let's
Mm-hmm.
say one of them, for example, the young woman feels that she's more emotionally attached to the young man, meaning she'll
Mm-hmm.
message him, six, seven times a day, asking him how he's going. He will sometimes respond, but sometimes he'll take hours to respond. And he rarely will ask her about how she's doing or initiate the conversation. But he seems engaged, like he seems like he's got emotion. In such a circumstance, would a young person um, give credence to the sort of emotional disconnect that's existing, or the cognitive dissonance that's occurring in their emotion? I don't know if you can even apply it that way, in their emotions, meaning something's telling them that, oh, I want to talk to this person. I want to have positive response from them. I want to feel like they care about me. They're interested in me. But something inside me is telling me that they're not right, and because they're just not reaching out to me, they're not initiating the conversation, and they may check off all the other boxes. They may be
Mm-hmm.
religious, they may have the good character, etc. All the things check off. They're educated, they have the career that we're looking for, etc. But this one emotional, let's say, deficiency is there. Should we give credence to this? Should people be saying, this is something that we don't just ignore and shelf away and move forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes it does like require just like a clear communication of just like is that something of how they communicate, because in that premarital stage, if that continues over into marriage and
Yeah,
we allow that kind of relationship, then it's like I've always been this way though, like I need my space or whatever,
yeah,
and you're thinking about all the other things that are checking off, but this specific part of it comes down to like respect too,
yeah,
like
yeah.
feeling for the other person and like making sure they feel emotionally safe. That's one of like the biggest things that when that's not there, um, it contributes to a lot of other types of issues and
Mm,
overthinking and
mm.
um,
So
struggle. But
is there, sorry again to cut you off, but is there a way to tell that this is not overthinking and that in fact they've hit the nail on the head? This person is not suitable from the emotional perspective, as a spouse, as a future spouse? Is there a way to tell?
um, it's difficult to tell from like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
emotional side. Like you can't
sure.
really see that until like real issues come up and when you're
Mm,
actually married. So it does
yeah,
come out of the equation, especially in this part of the getting to know. 'Cause
yeah,
emotions are
yeah.
variant always.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is what scares a lot of young people, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that they want a guarantee that the person they are going to marry is going to be what they envisioned, not
Mm-hmm.
only from the material perspective, again, putting faith aside, religion aside, adherence to religion, good character, but from the emotional perspective. And the only way for that to be confirmed, meaning that this person is suitable, is that if they spend time before the marriage, 6 months, 1 year, whatever, talking to each other, and then that way everyone can confirm that, yes, in fact, this is emotionally the right person for me in terms of their intelligence and sort of the way they express their emotion. But it's certainly not always possible, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the very important things that young people should learn today, take it from a guy with a gray beard and has been married a long time and deals with these things, that there's no sure thing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if you go into a premarital circumstance where you're meeting someone who's a prospective or a potential spouse with the thought in your mind that this is going to turn out perfect or not at all, then I think you have a flawed understanding of what marriage is.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage, yes. So maybe with your permission, we'll move forward sort of the discussion. Uh, Everyone knows that the reported hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam is that if you find somebody who is has the faith and the conviction and the religiosity that you need, is a good Muslim, good mu'min, and they have good character, then marry them. This is the basic, right? Now, by all means, one shouldn't just say, okay, well, they're religious and they have a good character that I should marry them. Compatibility is something; it is there, and you should certainly. I say this to couples all the time: marry somebody who is like you. That whole thing of opposites attract, I don't believe in it. I don't think it works. I think you
Mm-hmm.
want to find people someone who is like you. Now, the question is, even if you were to find somebody who is like you, will your marriage be perfect? Is there a guarantee? And I think young people who are hoping for that or think that that's going to happen may be in for sort of a rude awakening. Why? Because every marriage, irrespective of how compatible the spouses are, is going to face challenge. And so I think the right mindset when you come in, emotionally, rationally, from every perspective, is to go into marriage thinking, I found someone who's suitable. They've got the essentials that I want: faith, good character, they're honest, etc., good head of hair, etc., etc., whatever it is that you want in a spouse. Um, but I recognize that marriage is work and
Mm-hmm.
that I cannot um, ascribe or assign emotional value to the ups and downs in life when it comes to marital life. I hope that makes sense. At least that's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Marital life, if your partner is a good person and you know they're a good person, ups and downs are going to occur. There should be no emotional value, meaning this is emotionally positive or emotionally negative. It's just the work of marriage that is required, right? And I think that is
Mm-hmm.
something extremely important. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I see so many times with clients. This literally like last week, I had another couple come in saying, "I just want to know if he loves me," or
Yeah,
I don't like
yeah,
the and he just like wouldn't say it, and he had his own way of like expressing his love and care in the
yeah,
marriage, and she
yeah,
was just extremely anxious and like the value she was placing in like the emotional validation was way too high, and that was like the wall
yeah,
that was coming up in their marriage struggles like time and time again.
mm,
So it's like what are the actual things that we're like working on in the marriage or even like pre-marriage, like what are we looking for, but it leads to eventually that. So just placing the emotional, like am I feeling a spark or is he vibing with me or um sometimes you'll feel that, and then the other important things get missed, and then that change. Like you'll see so many times, like couples come in. I got married 3 months ago, or even like last month, and this person like 180. Before they were so
Mm,
caring,
yeah,
so this and that, and
always,
now
always. Wow,
you
yeah.
always see that the flip, and it's like, oh, well,
Yeah,
what were we
yeah. The
actually
number
looking
of
for
times
here
that
during?
has happened. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because you put your best foot forward, right? When you're meeting this person for potential marriage. After marriage, they're stuck. So that's it. You can
Mm-hmm.
reveal yourself, right? The
Yeah,
way you
yeah.
are. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in terms of this emotional attachment now, right? We get to the
Mm-hmm.
core aspect of it. Let me mention really quickly that in Islam, and I know there are going to be some questions about this potentially, but let me say it as clearly and maybe as tactfully as possible, that when you have two people who are not mahram to each other, meaning they're strangers to each other, they have the potential to get married in the future to each other, the rules of interaction are very strict. So between a man and a woman who are not mahram to each other, the rules of interaction are strict. It's not to say that a man cannot talk to a woman who is not mahram to him, or vice versa. That's not something that is prohibited. We can talk to other men, other women, or women can talk to men and do so in a manner that is completely permissible. What is impermissible is having conversations that lead to sin, that cause you to stray and do something against the code of Allah's religion, break Allah's rule. Not only that, but there's really no such thing as a social relationship between a man and a woman who are not mahram to each other. So I can't just hit up one of my friends who is a female and just chat her up on, iMessage or whatever, on Instagram. This is not allowed. It's not permissible. It is not. It is something that even is from the perspective of, even if they don't sin, it is something that should be happening. So someone came to me once and said, okay, well, what if I'm texting with a girl, and we're just having like regular conversation, nothing emotional, nothing other than that. Sayyid Sistani, if you see what his ruling is, or his answer to this question is, that as long as there is no risk of falling into sin, conversation between a man and one woman who are not mahram to each other is not necessarily prohibited, not necessarily prohibited. However, he then follows this up with a caution. He says these conversations are often what lead towards sin. They often are the ones that will cause you to go astray. So you should avoid it. And that is extremely key. Now, imagine you add on another level of, you're looking at this person potentially as being your romantic partner in life. So, what sort of a conversation are you going to have with them? So, let me just say it, that
Mm-hmm.
conversation between a man and a woman who want to get to know each other before marriage and want to learn about each other, it's very difficult for them to do that outside the bounds of marriage, meaning that inevitably they will talk to each other, they will converse with each other, text with each other, and it will become emotional, or it will become in a manner that gets them attached to each other, unless they absolutely have no chemistry and don't like each other, and that one conversation is a one-off, right? So that's why it's difficult. That's why I'll say it very openly, that temporary marriage is a very good option. Why? Because you get into the temporary marriage for the purpose of speaking and talking and getting to know each other, and you do so in a manner that is permissible by Allah. Now you don't have to worry about sinning. You don't have to worry
Mm-hmm.
about transgressing the rules of Allah. Um, so, that being said, let me throw it back to you. Let's again put aside the issue of temporary marriage, or permissibility and non permissibility. But when these two individuals are talking to each other for the purpose of getting to know each other for marriage, um, how do they navigate sort of that emotional aspect, right? Because it's inevitable. You're looking at this individual as a potential spouse, someone
Mm-hmm.
who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. It's impossible, almost again going back to that same point, not to get emotionally attached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think over here it's like really key and crucial to like have your boundaries and like what we're actually talking about here and how we are talking to each other, especially with like in social media. Like, oh, are we like sending random reels every day that are funny?
Yeah,
And are we like joking around with each other? Are we
yeah,
um, like speaking outside of like what are the true important questions that you want to know about in terms of like what you know are things that you may need in a marriage for yourself and what he or she like may want and like speaking to those important issues that actually like matter um and keeping it there than like sometimes getting on tangents and even like how often are you talking, how late are you talking, like these
yeah,
things also come into play. And how emotions, like if I'm texting someone late at night, like I'm not fully in my, you know, logical mode, or emotions can be more likely to be influenced of like, let me try asking a question that like leads into like an emotional type of question, or like
yeah,
it sometimes it doesn't even happen intentionally, but you need to like be very careful in like how you're maintaining like Islamic boundaries, even like in any kind of like premarital context of
yeah,
conversing with the other person and staying
yeah.
true to what is the goal here of why we're talking.
Yeah. So you see the question from Mahsa. I don't know if you saw that. How do you keep your heart open while still protecting yourself emotionally? Yeah. And that'll lead me to my next question then, Sarah, that
Mm-hmm,
let's say that emotional connection occurs and one of them breaks it off. And this is happening a lot,
mm-hmm,
unfortunately, where young people are talking to each other for the purpose of marriage. 6 months goes by, and then one of them suddenly breaks it off, and now you've got this sort of heartbreak that occurs, and they weren't even married at this point, right?
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
it's just now this emotional connection exists. So how do you keep your heart open, but also protect yourself from potentially experiencing a painful emotional moment?
Mm-hmm. I think this starts from like the very beginning of like when like keeping your heart open, it doesn't mean like you're opening up everything and being super vulnerable and like
Mm,
coming to a place of where you are allowing yourself to get attached. There are like boundaries and like how we are conversing with the other person. So in the case of when we're like purely going about it and like keeping our heart open, also like just keeping not being so like narrow minded, like okay, I'm looking for only like XYZ
yes.
qualities of this person and that's it, like not really, like let's look for, as you like quoted the holy prophet, of like, you know, the deen and the character
Yeah.
of the person.
Yeah.
But you're still protecting yourself because you don't know if this is the person that will end up being for you. Like this comes,
Yeah.
I always say to like my clients of like having tawakkul and trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like if
Mm,
this person was
mm,
meant for you, then it would happen.
mm,
But sometimes people like with their attachment styles, like they'll try to force like certain relationships and certain people that they started envisioning a whole future with, and then that attachment started. And then when the other person breaks it off, then it's like completely heart shattering and breaking.
yeah.
But then that
Yeah.
goes into like, okay, was
Yeah.
this person even meant for me? Or was
Yeah.
there like a lesson here? Or maybe
Sure.
I need to reflect on myself and how I'm approaching things to like
Mm,
really prevent, you know, that premature attachment, which is
yeah.
oftentimes happening.
Yeah. I think that you made some great points, and if I can add to that, my feeling, and I am again, I'm not a psychologist or a mental health professional, but just from seeing it from the perspective of being a scholar and dealing with these cases quite a bit, unfortunately, um, I wonder if the issue is that when you come into the circumstance, even prior to marriage, even prior to any commitments being made before marriage, and you're looking at that person with romantic eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's very different than looking at a person from the perspective of pragmatism and from the perspective of religious suitability. Um, and maybe it would behoove us, and I know this is not easy, to teach our young generations that when you come to find a potential spouse, the priority should be given to religious adherence and character.
Mhm.
Character, religious adherence, obviously, but character will tell you almost, if you look at it carefully enough, if you consult with your elders who can see things in a manner that's different from yours, maybe with a little more wisdom, that character will tell you what sort of romantic partner your future spouse is going to be. And I think you can
Mhm.
tell some of those things. That way, you prevent yourself from becoming too emotionally or romantically invested into the
Mhm.
circumstance, right? And I
Right.
think that is extremely key because the potential pitfall is very big then. And so you come into it, um, whether you're now the key, and let me mention this, that if the issue becomes a romantic issue and there is romantic interaction between two people outside of the bounds of marriage, meaning it's in the premarital stage, and they've developed this interaction, then that is not permissible. And
Mhm.
if it falls apart, not only have you committed a sin, but you're now facing heartbreak. On the other hand, let's say they made it permissible, right? They're not permanently married, but they're having this
Mhm.
interaction within the rules of Islam, and they develop this romantic connection. There's still that risk that if it
Mhm.
doesn't work out and turn into a permanent marriage, without me having to give all the details, that emotional heartbreak is going to be there, right?
Mhm.
So maybe we have to reframe how we approach marriage. And maybe the
Mhm.
modern era, unfortunately, with all the Instagram chats and the the video chats and all of our modern conferences that are taking place where young Shi'i individuals are meeting with each other and the opposite sexes are interacting, maybe we have to be more careful in those interactions. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even just thinking about like oftentimes you'll hear like, okay, but then how am I supposed to like get to know someone,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
how else are we supposed to like really make sure that this person like we're on the same wavelength? And we talked about the emotional connection too, but even like on values and so on and so forth. But that's why Islam is so beautiful, and like having these values of modesty and lowering your gaze like in these kinds of
yeah.
conferences and stuff, because why is that in place? Literally for this reason of protecting yourself.
Beautiful answer.
And
Yeah, I couldn't
it's
agree more. Yeah,
mhm. So having faith in that, like this is in place for a reason, it's in place for
yeah,
our benefit, and then
yeah.
inshallah if followed beautifully, then there would be a barakah in your future, and inshallah you find like the right person for you.
Yeah, yeah. In Islam, the term iffa is used, right? Iffa, which
Mm,
basically means chastity, or modesty, like you described. I think
mm,
it would behoove anyone who wants to get married to practice that,
mhm,
and to say, okay, I'm going to go into this with an open heart, but I'm not opening the door 100% to become romantically connected, because that
mhm,
romantic connection has to develop after marriage, not before. Yes, you
absolutely.
look for compatibility. You can look for compatibility. You can look for personality traits that match yours, etc. These sorts of things. But to open the door to romance is potentially opening up the door to something that is, dare I say, problematic, maybe in some circumstances, even
Mhm,
within when it is done legitimately. So let me give you the
right.
example of somebody who described their situation to me, and this is happening a lot as well. This person, this young woman, she was divorced, and she wanted to get married again. And so a young man came to her and proposed that they do a temporary marriage, and in the bounds of that temporary marriage, get to know each other. And he had sort of promised her that they are going to get married permanently, or at least had led her on to believe that that's what was going to eventually occur. After some time in this temporary marriage, he basically ghosted her. He stopped answering her. He stopped
Mhm,
giving any sort of indication that he was interested. And even though she reached out to him and kept asking him, he finally at the end said, "Look, it's not going to work out." And he gave sort of the typical, "It's not you, it's me. And, I'm not in that
mm,
place in my life." And this young woman was shattered. She was absolutely shattered. And it's quite horrible. Um,
mhm,
Mm, I want to address that just for 1 second. I
Yeah.
think there's two issues here. One, what we already described, that we have to be very guarded, not in the sense that we put up this impenetrable wall, because to some
Mm-hmm.
degree we have to open ourselves up to the prospect of the person we want to marry, but we do have to be guarded. Whether a person has been married before or not, although the circumstances for a divorcee or a widow are very different, obviously, than somebody who's never been married before. But the same principle applies in the sense that you come into it looking at the character, the honesty, the trustworthiness, the loyalty of this person who you want to marry, and say, I'm going to develop a romantic relationship with them after marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and do so in a manner that is acceptable by the sort of code of Islam. The other thing that I want to mention that I hate to say is happening a lot is that, and unfortunately, this is happening because men are behaving this way. Men are using temporary marriage, particularly with divorced women, because they would not need the permission of their wali, of their father or their paternal grandfather, marrying them, promising them a permanent marriage, but saying let's just see, test out the waters, and then we'll get married permanently, and then basically dropping them, and breaking
Mm-hmm.
up with them like that. And that is, I hate to say it, despicable. Now, maybe sometimes there are legitimate reasons why a man would not proceed. I don't want to say every man is bad, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of men are using this to, I hate to say it, play around with women, and misusing religious law and causing hurt to another human being's heart. This is another reason why we have to be very careful with our emotions when it comes to premarital relationships, or what we would consider to be a premarital relationship. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's helpful.
Absolutely. I think it was so important that you addressed that. I see it all the time, again and
Mm,
again, especially in our communities, and it's tough. And then the amount of therapeutic work that comes from
yeah.
like post experiencing that kind of like traumatic relational like event of like some like these temporary marriages last like years and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like a lot of like romantic feelings that start happening in that sense. And it's like
Mm,
really being so careful, like when you are like in Masa's question, like of how you're keeping your heart open, but protect yourself emotionally still, like in those
yeah.
scenarios, because
Yeah.
that can happen. And
Mm.
for
So is
people
there
who
is there
may
a
know,
yeah, sorry, go
mhm.
ahead. Finish your thought. Then I had a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say like people who may know people who do these kinds of activities like in the community stuff, like really like reevaluate like what are the real like emotional effects on the other person. But us, one thing, like also being aware ourselves too when we're get engaging in this kind of
Mm,
contractual relationship, then these are things that you need to like be aware of. It's not always just
yeah.
like an emotional ride. So protecting
Yeah.
ourselves, but also be aware of the consequence, because it damages people so much. Like it's
Yeah.
really sad to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
um but and not everyone seeks the therapy after, and it's like really difficult to come out of, and then it affects all of their
Mm,
future relationships and trust issues and so
yeah.
on. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ramifications of not giving it proper consideration are too big, because it's one thing if you don't have children, but if you have children, those
mm,
insecurities and emotional sort of deficiencies, if I would call it that, start to pass into the children, and children pick up on those things,
hmm,
and they learn those behaviors, and it's quite serious, unfortunately. So the question I wanted to ask you, and I think we only have a few more minutes to wrap up. Um, if a person were to come in and say, look, I want to get to know another human being, but I want to remain guarded. I want to protect myself from getting hurt in the event that this doesn't work. So I want to guard my emotions. Is there a specific quality that one can look in the other person, in the prospective or the potential spouse, that would reassure them that, yes, this is the right person? I'm going to now allow myself to open up a little bit to them and make myself, I don't know, vulnerable, emotionally to some degree, or open myself up emotionally to them? Is there a quality that one can look for in the other to say, yes, I'm going to trust my emotions with this person?
In the premarital state,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I think one of the biggest things that can provide that emotional safety is like seeing how they're going about it. So if they're involving like family, or
Mm,
they're involving like very clear like guidelines of, okay, like this is our interaction and this
mm,
is how we are, like I would like to get to know you in this way,
mm.
and it's like very clear cut, not like go with the flow or whatever, or like let's see where this goes type of
Yeah.
approach, but like families involved, or like community respected elders are involved,
Mm.
and not so much to the extent of like, oh my god, like everyone should know I'm like talking to this person, but there are like
Sure.
certain like safety measures where you can potentially be able to open yourself a little bit more, but even then it is still like something that needs to
Yeah.
be very carefully approached.
Yeah. In my experience, Sarah, I realized one thing after many years is,
Mm,
there's no perfect tell, right? So you
right.
call it a tell that would, or a
Mm,
character trait that would reveal
right.
to you that this person is going to be perfect, because there is no
Mm,
such thing. There is no perfect
right.
spouse. You will face
Right.
some ups and downs. But in my mind, and this is what that young woman who reached out to me about, um, the man who basically broke it off with her, I said two things to her. One, you don't want somebody who doesn't want you.
Mm,
Yes, sometimes we need to sit and think about things and we need to work things out in our mind. But if a person has gone 9 months and they still don't know, or even 6 months and they still don't know, and they're giving you the runaround, they're playing around with you more often than not, right? So
mhm,
you
mhm,
don't want somebody like that. You want someone who's going to value you, who sees the value in you and immediately wants to snatch you up so that nobody else can take you, right? And marry you.
mhm,
This goes for both men and women. The other
right.
thing is, if I were to say that there's a tell, and it's not always easy to spot, but that's why they do what you just described, is have elders and people there with you who can help, is look for a spouse, men towards women, women towards men. Look for a spouse who will be a champion for your rights as a human being,
Mm,
right? Who you can confidently say that they will never allow injustice to be done to me, not by their own hands or the hands of anybody else. Yeah.
mhm, mhm,
That way, if there's ever any problem in the marriage, which inevitably it's going to be, you can rely on the fact that they will be at least fair to you. They'll be just
mhm,
with you. They may not be emotionally available, they may not give you affection in the way you want it, but they will at least be just and fair to you to protect your rights. And that's why you see, sort of the beauty of the ayah that you mentioned in the beginning, that Allah doesn't just say, love between spouses, He says mercy, right?
mhm,
Mercy is
mhm,
what? It's a recognition that somebody else needs us to lift them up and protect them in some way, right? So
mhm,
in my mind, that's something that if spouses, or people look for in their spouses or their future spouses, then that's a very important quality to have. Will my spouse, will this person, stand up for my rights once we get married? Will they champion, my well-being? Will they look out for me and what's good for
mhm.
me, just like I would for them? And I think if the answer to that is no, that puts a very big question mark on this person being a good spouse. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That comes down to just even having respect for the other person
Yeah,
and
yeah,
communication.
absolutely. But this is what you see. You see the beauty of this in the example of
Mhm,
Rasulullah and Sayyidah Khadija, or Imam
mhm,
Ali alayhi salam and Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, right? Is this
mhm,
mutual respect for each other, this love, but respect in that, yes, they were perfect, but in our marriages, even if we have disagreements, we know that we will treat each other fairly at least. We will not
justly.
allow each other's rights to be trampled in any way. And
Mhm,
that gives a level of sukoon, right? It gives a level of peace and tranquility that you know you're going into a marriage, marrying someone who will never willfully harm you. Yeah, maybe they'll make
mhm,
mistakes, but never willfully try to take your rights
Right.
away or oppress you in any way. It gives you an emotional sort of peace almost. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're at time. Any closing thoughts? This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. If there's one thing I could plug to like further destigmatize mental health services and therapy,
Yeah.
premarital
Yeah.
counseling is also
Yeah.
another one of those things. Like if this person is
Mhm.
also like willing to sit with you and like go over like those rights, like does this even person even know what it means to be just to the other person, or are they have their own like mind view or cultural view of what that means? Like gaining that clarity even like a space of like a therapeutic setting or with a scholar or like
Mhm.
a Islamically informed therapist, that's always like a good idea and like a good investment before like, tying the knot. So, and you do get to
Absolutely.
know another person like deeper on like important issues. So,
Mm.
absolutely, that's also another thing that I
Wonderful.
encourage a lot of people to consider.
Yes, and if I can, I will plug my colleague Sarah. That reach out to her. MashaAllah, she's very bright and an excellent resource in our communities. I've also shared Psyched for You's email, which you can reach us at. You can find us at psychedforyou.org. And I am also available. I do a lot of premarital counseling and unfortunately deal with the fallout of relationships not working or becoming rocky. And by no means have we covered everything in the last hour, but certainly we would love to hear from you. So you can reach out with your comments, your questions, and anything else. And if I can close, I will say two things. One, always remember that if you adhere to Allah's law, follow the religious code, then Allah will protect you. He will definitely protect you. There's no question about that.
Mm.
So start by ensuring you don't violate Allah's law. And number two, um, honor yourself. Remember that you in this relationship don't have to sell yourself out completely.
Mhm.
You're joining in a partnership that should be 50-50. Doesn't always work that way, but realize that you have an honor and a dignity Allah has given to you. So honor that. Keep yourself at an even playing field with your spouse. And then at the same time, honor them and allow them to have their honor in front of Allah and in your relationship. This balances emotion. This balances expectation, which causes emotional upheaval, right? Because when expectations aren't met, our emotions tend to go all over the place. So if we follow these three codes, right, at least in my mind, which is a little overly simplistic, I think we can, make those relationships better, or at least navigating them becomes a little more straightforward. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think you concluded it perfectly.
Inshallah.
Just
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me. And thank you to everyone who's listening. And inshallah, like I said, reach out um, to my excellent colleague and the rest of the team who we are all here to help. And keep us in your prayers, and we will keep you in ours, inshallah. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you.